Hi, I'm David Johnson, and this is Verse by Verse. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, we probably share some important beliefs. For example, we sincerely believe that God exists, that the Bible is His inspired word, and that the choices we make in life should be guided by what Scripture says. When people share those beliefs, it gives a solid foundation for building a positive relationship with God and with one another. One of the profound truths that we share is the belief that God, in spite of the fact that He is awesome beyond our ability to even comprehend, invites us to talk with Him, and He offers to listen and respond. Our communication with God in this way is called prayer. And the Bible speaks directly about prayer nearly 400 times. Now, that doesn't mean that prayer is a big, complicated subject that's difficult to understand. After all, prayer is basically just talking with God, isn't it? Well, yes, it is. But no, that's not all there is to it. The New Testament tells us that Jesus' own disciples asked Him to teach them how to pray. These were grown men who had attended the synagogues their entire lives. They'd heard the priests and other religious people praying, but they recognized that what they'd been hearing and seeing and what Jesus was saying and doing were not the same. Who taught you how to pray? Some people believe in reciting what they call the Lord's Prayer every week, even though Jesus specifically taught against empty, mindless repetition in prayer. Some gather at set times of the day, regardless of whatever else might be going on, to open their prayer books and recite ancient prayers together. In some traditions, prayers must use archaic words like thee and thou, as if God doesn't understand the language of today. Some even insist that prayers must be in a certain language, like Latin or Greek or Hebrew. And for others, prayer seems to be a little more than a ritual to be checked off from the daily to-do list. A blessing on a meal, a child's bedtime prayer, a duty performed and forgotten. But in spite of those varied traditions, it seems that most of those prayers go unanswered. Prominent religious leaders pray for an end to war or famine or disease, and the wars and famines and diseases continue unabated. Does prayer actually do any good, or is it just a psychological gimmick that enables us to calm down a bit and cope with the stresses of life a little better? Does God, the God described in the Bible as the Almighty, the Creator of all things, the eternal God, actually hear and answer prayers? If so, why does He answer some and not others? Scripture actually tells us quite a bit about the kind of prayer God hears and answers and the kind He doesn't. James tells us that selfish prayers will go unanswered. Jesus talked about the religious leaders of His day who offered hypocritical, self-righteous prayers in order to be seen by others, and Jesus said they already had all the reward they would ever receive. Let's take a moment to consider one passage where God inspired the psalmist to address one of the most common barriers to answered prayer. It's found in Psalm 66, verse 18. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear. This passage can be translated in a couple of different ways, but the fundamental idea is the same. To go through the motions of prayer while we know we're sinning and living contrary to God's instructions will not produce a positive response from God. We may be able to hide our sin from others, but God sees and knows all. In fact, in the Greek of the New Testament, He is twice called the kardiagnostes, which means the one who knows the heart. The psalmist is not talking about the person who's struggling to overcome a sin. God is very merciful to such a person. But if we recognize we're living contrary to His laws, and we're not genuinely striving to overcome those sins, He turns away and refuses to hear our prayers until we're ready to bring our lives in line with His instructions. God's offer to listen to our prayers and respond is a genuine offer, but our efforts to talk with Him must be genuine too. God does not require us to use just the right words in just the right way at just the right time in order to bring our requests to Him. But He does require us to honestly consider the way we're living and make sure we're genuinely trying to bring our lives into line with His instructions. If God doesn't seem to be hearing our prayers, maybe we need to take a closer look at the way we're living. If you'd like to learn more about effective prayer and how you can receive God's answers to your requests, you can find a number of helpful articles on the Life, Hope, and Truth website. Check out the show notes for details.
Verse by Verse is a companion podcast to the Daily Bible Verse blog, which you can find on the Life, Hope, and Truth Learning Center. Check out the show notes for more.